Hey, this is Derek, and you're listening to Skepticality, the official audio program of Skeptic Magazine, for Tuesday, November 13th, 2012. Skepticality. Science! Welcome back to another episode of Skepticality, the show that brings you news and interviews with people from all walks of life for the promotion of critical thinking and, so in the past, I would have inserted a cool science shout-out here. I could have done it myself. But however, as we've stated way back at the beginning of this year, any of you out there can send us your own science shout-out. For those of you who are new to the show, or those of you who have been listening and didn't hear that episode, you can send us your own version of a science shout-out. Send it to us at host@skepticality.com. And while you go record your own science shout-out for us, let us find out what lessons our skeptical friends have to say for this week.
I'm Tim Farley of whatstheharm.net and skeptools.com, and this is Skepticism Past and Future. This week, I've got updates of things I've talked about in past episodes and an announcement. 1 year ago, in Skepticality number 169, I talked about Scientology's many historical setbacks, as well as the connection between UFOs and television. 1 year later, we see that stories relating to these topics are still in the news. Scientology has had an astonishingly bad year. Between the meltdown of Tom Cruise's marriage, defection of other celebrity members, dissension in the ranks among people who are still in the church, and several deaths at the church's Narconon facilities that are now under investigation. In my UFO segment in that episode, I related how three famous stories, the Betty and Barney Hill incident, the Deshmont Wood UFO in Scotland, and the Travis Walton abduction, all can be connected to a UFO-related television program which aired a few days or weeks prior to some element in the story. The suggestion is that the psychological phenomenon of priming may have been involved. This year, a recent article in The Telegraph reports that UFO enthusiasts in England are increasingly coming to the same conclusion that skeptics have had for years, that the truth may not be out there after all. When you get down to it, there is just not that much evidence at all for extraterrestrial visitations, and the passage of time and the ubiquity of camera phones suggests that by now we should have had better evidence if it were so. At my SkepTools blog, I focus on online tools that skeptics can use to be more effective. I think clever use of such tools is a great way to magnify our efforts. One excellent such tool is Simon Perry's Fish Barrel. It is a piece of software that plugs into your Chrome web browser and assists you in filing complaints about quacks and other charlatans who are violating advertising standards and other government regulations. It has complaint templates for Australia, Canada, Denmark, Ireland, New Zealand, the UK, and the United States. Particularly in the UK, skeptics have been very effective in using it to get alternative medicine practitioners to comply with regulations. But Simon tells me he's been disappointed to see usage of the tool dropping off. Despite that, he recently updated it, and it is now available in the Chrome store. If you have already been using it, uninstall the old version before installing the new one. It is free. Please check out this tool and give it a whirl. It is important that we have as many skeptics as possible keeping an eye out for quacks violating the rules. And let's show Simon that his efforts are appreciated. Another tool that I've talked about before that has updated is Pundit Tracker. This site keeps accuracy scores for political, sports, and financial pundits. But they also require crowd activity to vote on each prediction for boldness. To encourage that, They are running a challenge in which you can win prizes just for voting. The top prize will earn you a slot to be tracked as if you were a pundit yourself. Truth Market is another tool I talked about back in Skepticality number 192. I like to think of it as a cross between things like the $1 Million Challenge and crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter. They crowdfund prizes that are offered for proof of dubious claims in the media. They recently added Chris Mooney to their board of directors. And because they know they need groups like skeptics to adopt their platform, they've announced what they call an affinity program. Under this program, like-minded groups who want to participate in Truth Market can get some of the necessary fees waived and will receive PR assistance from the site. The program runs through December 31st, and I encourage skeptics to check it out. And now, on a personal note, like Simon Perry, I think I've noticed a falling off of productive activity by skeptics online of late. I'm not sure why this is happening and to what degree, but it has me a bit discouraged that my own efforts to encourage online activism are not being effective. I also have a large number of different projects going, including What's the Harm, Skeptic History, Virtual Skeptics, and so on, and I'm beginning to wonder if my time could be better allocated between them. I think perhaps I can refocus my efforts and perhaps take them in a new direction. But I need some time to recharge my batteries and think about what that direction might be. And so, at least until the end of the year, I'm going to put this podcast segment and a few of my other skeptic efforts on hiatus and take a bit of a skeptic vacation. I'll return after the holidays, hopefully with some new ideas. I hope you won't mind. And this brings us to the end of another edition of Skepticism Past and Future. Links to additional material are in the show notes, and follow me on Twitter or Facebook under the name Krelnick, Krelnik, where the daily Skeptic History Facts will continue.
This is Bob Carroll, creator of the Skeptics Dictionary and the blog Unnatural Acts That Can Improve Your Thinking. Welcome to another episode of Unnatural Virtue. Today's topic is the so-called fantasy-prone personality. Why is it that some people, like Michael Shermer, who hallucinated that he was abducted by aliens, realize they're hallucinating, while others with the same kind of hallucination believe they really were abducted by aliens? One answer is that Shermer, unlike the true believers, does not possess a fantasy-prone personality. The Harvard psychiatrist John Mack risked his reputation by taking seriously a number of people who claimed they had been abducted by aliens. Joe Nickel studied 13 of Mack's best cases and found high fantasy proneness among these subjects. Psychologist Robert Baker was the first to suggest that alien abductees exhibited the traits of fantasy proneness. Nickel approvingly refers to Baker's characterization of Cheryl Wilson and Theodore Barber's 1983 paper that first introduced the idea of the fantasy-prone personality as important but much neglected. I thought I'd take a look at the paper and decide for myself how important it is. Wilson and Barber's paper was based on a small study of hypnotic susceptibility. They interviewed 27 highly hypnotizable women and found that 26 of them shared, quote, a series of interrelated characteristics, a syndrome or personality type that we are labeling as the fantasy-prone personality, end quote. They compared the highly hypnotizable women to 25 volunteers from women students of a nearby college who were paid $10 each to be tested for imaginative ability. The 27 subjects in the fantasy-prone group were not randomly selected either. 2 were in therapy with Wilson or Barber for weight loss and phobia. 5 were paraprofessional therapists, some of whom practiced therapeutic touch. 5 were participants in earlier studies on hypnosis by Wilson and Barber. And 15 were selected from their hypnosis workshops. They found that 2/3 of their fantasy-prone personality subjects believed that they possessed healing powers. This non-random sample hardly comprises a representative sample of highly hypnotizable people, and certainly is not sufficient to justify deriving a personality type from qualities these folks shared. Without replication in larger studies using randomly selected samples, or at least samples of other types of fantasizers, artists and creative writers, for example, or at least a group not identified by their attachment to hypnosis, the findings of Wilson and Barber should be considered preliminary at best. Later research, however, has failed to replicate a strong association between being fantasy-prone and being hypnotizable, much less a strong association between being fantasy-prone and believing one has been abducted by aliens. Nichols' work in particular suffers from not having a control group. Would he have found a significant number of fantasy-proneness traits in a random sample of people who did not claim to be abducted by aliens? Who knows? There has been very little research that has attempted to replicate or validate Wilson and Barber's work. I think until replication is done, we should refrain from putting forth the idea that there is a single type of personality that is susceptible to a variety of fantasies. In any case, I question the predictive or explanatory power of the concept of the fantasy-prone personality, especially since the label has been applied to such disparate characters as Sylvia Browne and Emily Bronte, the one a gregarious, interminable babbler, and the other a creative loner. In his article, Ghost Author, The Channeling of Patience Worth, published in the May 2012 issue of Skeptical Inquirer, Nichols writes that the century-old case can now be closed. Actually, there are two cases here. One is the case Nichols declares closed, the one where Pearl Curran, who lived from 1883 to 1937, claims that a spirit she called Patience Worth was set free from her body in Nantucket by Indians in the 17th century, migrated into a board game in St. Louis 300 years later to dictate books. For me, that case was closed before it was opened. The story is too preposterous to take seriously. The other case, however, is intriguing and involves trying to figure out how Curran pulled off her channeling stunt. What was her motivation? Who helped her? Did Curran deliberately defraud her publisher and true believer in spiritualism, Henry Holt? Holt published several of Curran's books, allegedly written by the ghost Pearl Curran. The case as to whether Curran was a hoaxer and fraud, or just deluded, still remains open. Maybe Curran was, as Nichols claims, a fantasy-prone personality, but was she aware of the fact that Patience Worth wasn't really a spirit? Did Curran suffer from dissociation identity disorder, some have claimed, while retaining the ability to recognize that her alter was her own creation? What kind of evidence would be relevant to determining whether Curran was a fraud? Her writings, manuscripts, letters, etc. might help here if there is a confession somewhere, or if the documents show they were written by someone other than Curran. The study of documents like those Nichols examined reveal, as he noted, that her writing process was pretty much like that of many other writers in terms of writing and rewriting. The spirit of Patience Worth might have had the power to travel back to the time of Jesus to do original research, but it couldn't dictate anything without requiring rewrites and second starts, etc. That's in addition to the silly expressions like many moons ago, her misuse of 17th century pronouns, and all the fey Scotticisms in her writings. The belief that Curran had a second personality dissociated from her Curran self seems to be based on little more than the fact that Curran claimed her books and poems were dictated to her by Patience Worth. Since the issue of fraud hinges on whether Curran is trustworthy, we really can't use her testimony to verify that a dissociated persona was doing the writing. In any case, does calling Worth a fantasy-prone personality let her off the fraud hook too easily? I'm not convinced that she didn't pull off one of the better literary hoaxes of her time. She may deserve more credit for getting published and promoting her writing than she's been given. Was she a fraud? I don't know. Kudos to her for getting the attention she did, but rather than being fantasy-prone herself, maybe she just took advantage of the desire of others to believe in fantasies of an afterlife. Well, that's it for this episode of Unnatural Virtue. To find out more about the topics mentioned here, see my website, The Skeptic's Dictionary, and my blog Unnatural Acts that can improve your thinking. In the meantime, please, commit some unnatural acts in public. And don't forget, skepticism, the one natural, is a virtue.
Hello, and welcome to The Odds Must Be Crazy on Skepticality, where we use entertaining and surprising stories as an opportunity to dash your hopes and dreams using science. And you love every minute of it. Well, most of the minutes.
I'm Wendy Hughes.
And I'm Jarrett Kaufman.
And we're here to tell you the stories that will knock your socks off or make your hair stand on end or maybe just feel a little more in touch with reality by the end of the segment.
Reality? Who wants that? Unless you're producing cheap TV and have a shaky definition of the word. Anyway, this story about a lost and found object was contributed by listener Shane Dobson. As always, it can be found on our site by searching The Lost Ring or by clicking the link in the show notes. Shane writes, My wife and I had a hard time picking our wedding rings. We looked at several options and finally found some at a place that specialized in Irish jewelry. My now wife chose a nice gold design based on a Claddagh ring, and I chose a white and yellow Celtic knot pattern. They took some time to come in as they were made in Ireland, but we were very happy with them when they arrived. My band was quite wider than usual, and after some months of wearing it, I found that when my hands got wet, the water stayed trapped under the ring and irritated my finger. I started the habit of taking off my ring whenever I was doing the dishes or just washing my hands, then putting it back on after I had dried. I was very conscious of not wanting to lose it, so always put it in the same place wherever I was. I did this for 2 years without losing it for more than a day only once. Then one day in the winter, I lost track of it. I was not immediately concerned because I thought I would just find it at one of the places I usually left it, but after a few days of not seeing it, I did get worried. I did a thorough search of all my usual places and pockets of all my pants and jackets, but to no avail. It was lost. After telling my wife, who was only a little upset as I had just found her lost ring a few weeks before, we decided to order a new one from the same store. The store was a fair drive from our house, so it took us a couple months to find the time to go. We talked to the store owner, and she found a great replacement that had the Celtic knot cut out of the ring so it would not stay wet under the band, so no need to take it off anymore. She said that she was going to Ireland in a few months to buy for the store and would contact us when she was back. About 5 months later, she called back saying she had ordered it, but had not been ready when she left, so it would be about another 6 weeks for it to arrive. Then, finally, she called me at work and said it was ready to be picked up. I was now working close to the store, so I drove over during lunch and then went back to work. My coworkers were interested in it, and so I told them the whole story of losing it and getting the new one. After I was finished, I returned to my desk, and I was about to sit down. It was winter again, so I was wearing a sweater I don't wear often. I went to adjust it and felt something in the pocket. I put my hand into the pocket with a sinking feeling and pulled out my lost ring. It had been there for almost a whole year, and now I had found it within an hour of getting my new one. What are the odds?
So, Shane was careful about drying his hands, but not careful enough about remembering where he was putting his wedding ring. Then he found it in the pocket of his winter sweater immediately after receiving its replacement. I bet the listeners are looking forward to Barbara's analysis.
I know I was. This is one of my recent favorites. Anyway, from what I read, Barbara attempted to calculate the odds by using the available information, although she said there was some information missing, which is common. She also used the opportunity to discuss another important logical fallacy, and one of my favorites. Good old post hoc ergo propter hoc. Want to share her work, Wendy?
Happy to. According to Barbara, the odds of this happening are really impossible to calculate, but it is an opportunity to talk about some interesting human behaviors that we all engage in. Usually, when I note that something is difficult to calculate, it's because we don't have enough information. In this case, though, it's mostly because both the arrival of the replacement ring and the timing of finding the ring are open-ended. Each could have happened in a matter of a few days, a few weeks, years, or never. Replacing the ring is a matter of choice, although I imagine that most people would not replace it immediately because they hope to find it. If the ring is sitting in a pocket somewhere, the probability of finding it about a year later is actually pretty high, given that clothing tends to be worn seasonally. Most of us have probably found something that we thought we'd lost in the pocket of a jacket we rarely wear at least one time.
That makes sense. I know I only find things in my jackets when I bother to wear them, which isn't often in L.A. But what about the precise timing?
Barbara talks about that next. She says, the interesting part of this story is, of course, that it was found so soon after it was replaced, almost like a car breaking down the day after the warranty expires. Of course, that's not a coincidence at all. Warranty terms are chosen based on expectations for product wear and tear. Nevertheless, when we notice two events that might be related occur close together in time, we feel like one caused the other. We feel that way because we learned that it's usually the way things work, and this helps us to predict and perhaps control events. This feeling is at least partially responsible for things such as vaccine fear. Parents who noticed autistic behavior shortly after their toddler was vaccinated are often convinced that the vaccination caused the symptoms, yet we know from research that the two are unrelated. Autism symptoms tend to appear as children reach a specific developmental stage, and vaccines are administered on a recommended schedule, so they tend to occur around the same time. So while the odds of this particular series of events can't really be calculated, the way things like this makes us feel is explainable. Of course, explaining it doesn't make it any less cool.
Wendy, for our Latin-impaired crowd, can you give a loose translation of post hoc ergo propter hoc?
Sure. After the thing, therefore, because of the thing is how I like to put it. I think of it every time I'm startled by my statement from my cellular phone service. The fallacy is that people put together events that may be correlated, but not causal. However, my phone bill would make a poor example of this. It definitely reflects my obsession with my smartphone.
And the carriers wouldn't have it any other way.
Thanks for listening to The Odds Must Be Crazy on Skepticality. Please remember to visit our website at theoddsmustbecrazy.com so you can read all of the other stories, then comment on them, and then feel better about yourself. That's not post hoc ergo propter hoc. That's just reality.
Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, circle us on Google+, and validate us in life. Hit the Submit a Story link on our site to share your own crazy stories, or tweet the short ones with the hashtag TOMBC.
The Odds Must Be Crazy is a project in collaboration with the Independent Investigations Group in Los Angeles, California. Visit them at iigwest.org.
Barbara Drescher is a contributing editor to our blog and can also be found at icbseverywhere.com.
Special thanks to our stand-in producer and audio engineer, Emery. Our theme music comes to us courtesy of Mr. Deity himself, Brian Keith Dalton. You can find him at MrDeity.com.
So the next time you lose something, don't forget to obsessively search the pocket of every single item of clothing you own. You just might find it before taking extreme measures. Hey, where are you going, Wendy?
I'm going to go check my closet for my dignity.
Thanks again, everybody. So we often make the claim here on Skepticality that humor is a great way to promote rational thought and science. So that's why I was very excited to receive the book Fake Science 101 in the mail from our guest this episode. Fake Science, much like the books America by Jon Stewart. If you have a sense of humor about the real world, this is your kind of book. The author, Phil Edwards, was kind enough to give me some of his time to talk about the book and how it all came about. So I'm here today with Phil Edwards. You're mainly an author?
Yes, that's pretty much what I'm focusing my time on these days.
Yeah, so later on I'm going to get to the book I have you on for, which is Fake Science. But so you are a writer and former Walmart employee.
I am, yes.
So that's your background, I guess.
I've done some time. In fact, it's funny. I was at a Walmart this past week, returning about $125 worth of miscellaneous items, and I had some flashbacks realizing what a pain I was being as a customer. Though my tenure wasn't long enough for me to get to the level where I was handling returns. I was mainly just a cashier, but I still had a few flashbacks.
So you were a low-level Walmart employee.
I was, but I was a cashier. There were some people who didn't make it to the cashier level, believe it or not.
Oh. They were
stuck just folding clothes, so...
so what happens, in the hierarchy of Walmart, then, what happens before cashier?
Yeah, it's, I guess it's just the zoner or the unloaders of things.
Oh.
Though I'm sure they have their own merits as well, but I did get to be on the front end, so... So
I don't have you on to talk about Walmart, but I thought that was interesting that you made that...
Drat.
You made that very... prominent on your own website, so had to mention it. You have authored a list of fairly interesting books, like you've done some mystery books and such. Tell me a little about the Jake Russo mystery books.
Yes, well, that's been a really fun project for me, and it's been kind of interesting to talk about occasionally with respect to the fake science stuff, because while the fake science stuff is pretty dry in the book, and there are a lot of allusions that I think are at least obscure. They might not fully make it to intelligent, but they're a little confusing for readers. In the meanwhile, this mystery series I've done is a very Agatha Christie-esque or kind of movie of the week mystery series where this bumbling reporter ventures to different subcultures and has a few PG-rated adventures there while solving the murder of the week. And so that's been something that over the past year, I've gotten to spend a lot of time on, and that's been a ton of fun too, and has involved its own little type of research in figuring out what subculture or niche he'll invade next. So getting to do that is a neat distraction from all the other stuff as well.
And that's quite a few of them. What, about 6 or 7?
There are. Well, there are 5 now, and it's sort of waiting to see if it makes sense for me to do a 6th. So the 5th one ends on a note that could finish it off, and I never thought I'd do 5 of them either. So it's just the demands of the market sometimes push you into doing things that you never would have expected you'd do. So.
Those darn customers wanting to like your stuff.
Exactly.
Also, according to your website, you somehow got fascinated with Snooki from Jersey Shore?
Well, it was funny with that. A friend and I were looking over lists of various books that had appeared on Amazon, and we said, what would be a good mashup? Because we were familiar with the Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and all the other books that I think it's Quirk Books is the publisher, all the books they've done. And so then we were looking at various public domain books, and we saw that Alice in Wonderland was one of the top public domain books, and it just seemed like it would be a lot of fun to do a mashup called Snooki in Wonderland, which is what I ended up with. And that was really cool because, first of all, Alice in Wonderland is a very funny book. Yeah. I hadn't read it in a while, and I'd only seen the, no offense, but rather half-baked movie of it that came out a year or two ago. I don't know who I'd be offending in case Johnny Depp is listening to this. But I'd seen that, but reading the book was awesome. It's very funny. And working with the original John Tennille illustrations, I altered those to put Snooki in and imitate the style. And that was a lot of fun, too, because they're really neat illustrations. So that was my one foray into mashup culture. And it turned out to be pretty popular for the day or two that the internet was excited to eat it up and then move on to the next thing.
Well, the internet is very fickle.
Yes, indeed.
And then you moved on to the Dumb Employed website?
Yeah, that's another thing. A friend and I, we started a site in a very naked attempt to get a blog to book deal. That was like in the conceiving order of the book. And so we built this site that's a little like F My Life, but for jobs. And so people would go on there and submit their complaints about their jobs. We usually had to edit them very heavily, both for grammar and for propriety. But eventually that became a book, and that right now is a little bathroom reading caliber book of short little jokes and charts and graphs that people can read when they're frustrated with their boss or just have a few minutes to kill.
It reminded me a lot of that old website back in like 1999, 2000, Aft Company.
Yes, yeah. Maybe definitely some similarities there. I'm still undecided whether our timing with respect to the recession was either good timing or the worst timing you could possibly have. It might seem a little awkward to be complaining about your job at this point in history.
Although that got picked up by a movie for the movie rights, right?
Well, yeah, and of course that process is all very glacial and totally opaque to me. So all we know is that somebody at Warner Brothers saw the name Dumb Employed and it fired a neuron for them, and they, or a synapse, and they decided to pick it up. So my theory is that right now our book is collecting dust in some vast storage room next to props from Indiana Jones or something like that. But
oh no,
we'll see. Maybe something will happen. I still hold out hope for it, but
So then, after that, you did another website to book project, which is the one I'm talking to you about now, which is Fake Science, which I assume the website was before the book?
Yes, it was. Well, the genesis of that was that I was working on the Dumb Employed book with my friend and co-author, Matt Kraft, and we were doing research for what we wanted the book to be like, and I saw that a few other books were really cool and were really elaborate textbooks. That wasn't an option for Dumb Employed, but I decided I just want to do a book like that. That's exactly the type of thing that I think would be a blast to do. And so from there, I decided that I wanted to do my own project. I chose to put it on Tumblr because I'd seen so many people be successful with that platform, and Fake Science ended up being it. And that started about 2 years ago, and pretty quickly I obtained a literary agent who you then go to various editors to try to sign the book, and then we suddenly had a contract to produce this very large textbook, which turned out to be even longer than I thought it was going to be. And so I worked on it, and so it all started about 2 years ago, and now here it is. It's out in the world.
If anybody wants an idea about what this book is, it might be the science textbook version of America the Book by Jon Stewart.
Yes, that is a very good description, and one that I frequently employed to explain it to confused relatives and strangers who I'm meeting who want to know what a fake science book is.
Yeah, because, I mean, the information is that, well, you would never use this to, like, prove any point, but, you know, you have to be pretty savvy on the topics, really, to get the joke.
I think there's a mix, as it is on the site that it's based on. There's a mix of just really, really dumb jokes and the occasional reference to Feynman or some sort of process of DNA transcription that people who are interested in it might be actually excited to see.
Like one part you have about that. When they were trying to figure out when Crick was trying to figure out what to call DNA, he said, hey, I found out this thing, it's called and.
Yes, that's I have a very science nerdy Who's on First homage in the book that takes the form of that transcript. So that was really fun to write. I will have to work to get a troupe of performers to take that to vaudeville or something. So
I could see a stage humor science play out of this. It'd kind of be funny.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So how'd this come about then? Are you just a giant fan of science?
It really came about because a friend and I had an inside joke where he and I would walk around and just be confused by various things. Instead of seeking an actual explanation, we would just say, oh, I imagine some sort of science is involved. It must be science. And we just go on with the rest of our day, whether it was looking at a lit-up billboard or figuring out how traffic lights worked. I mean, some of them we could piece together a partial explanation, but for the rest we had to rely upon buzzwords and the invocation of the word science. And so from there I thought, oh, it'd be kind of funny if I actually learned how these things work. But then I decided I wanted to do it without the burden of any real information. And so from there, I started the Fake Science blog. And I had no idea that it would keep going this long, but it has. So
yeah, because the book really is, you have to have a really good respect and enjoyment of dry humor.
Yeah.
The whole thing is dry humor, and if you don't keep in the back of your head it's all fake science, you can really get like, what the heck? Is that right?
My theory is that I have a range of people who read the book, from people who are liberal arts majors to scientists, and my theory is that let's say if a biologist is reading the book, they might read the astronomy, chemistry, physics, and earth science chapters and be like, oh, this is hilarious. But then when they get to the biology chapter, suddenly this little bell is dinging in their head, and they're saying, wait a second, that's not right at all. Like, that's completely inaccurate. And the same for each discipline. So people have to turn off their accuracy button for accuracy switch for whatever discipline is most closely related to what they do.
Oh, I would definitely say that, because it's so just almost believable. But if you know the topic, you'd be like, what? This is completely wrong.
Yes. So hopefully there's, a few people who know to skip their section so they don't go too crazy. I might have felt a little that way in the history section, because in the beginning of the book there's something called What is Science that introduces just the history of science. But fortunately I don't have that much fidelity to the truth, even in areas that I know a lot about, so I was okay with it.
It made it, the cognitive dissonance be okay with you.
Yeah. Yes, I can handle it.
Tell people a little bit about where they can get the book and your website. Websites, plural, because you have more than one.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'd say the best place for them to go to is they can go to fakescience.tumblr.com, or they can just find it by Googling fake science, and there will be a big link at the top of the page to check out the book. And the book is available at online retailers and booksellers near you. It's called Fake Science 101, a less than factual guide to our amazing world. And I like to say this, I don't hear authors say this much, but it is pretty affordable if you get it at the right place. And it's a large, full-color book. So
yeah.
That's my little sales pitch for it, is that it's actually kind of cheap. So
yeah, I went on Amazon actually earlier today just to take a look at it. I was shocked at how affordable it is, because it's all four color printed all the way through.
Yes, yeah, and there's a lot of pictures and stuff, so it's a pretty good deal for a little coffee table book that you can read while you're waiting for supper to cook or watching TV in the background. And there's a lot of information to keep you busy.
I would say get it and then give it to any of your friends who believe in really weird pseudoscience.
Yes, definitely.
Give them new ideas.
Yeah.
How many of those ideas would they actually think are true?
We'll see,
Very cool. And then also you have your Dumb Employed website, and yes. Many of your other books are actually, a couple of them are just plain Kindle books, and then your other books are actually on Amazon as well.
Yeah, if anyone is interested in seeing all those projects I've mentioned, they're at philedwardsinc.com.
Very cool.
Find it there.
You're your own company.
Yes, for the time being. Though the ink is entirely in my head, but it helps anyway.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking some time.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
I have to thank Phil for his time once again, and adding another great way to promote science to the world. A couple weeks ago was the annual CSI Con in Nashville, Tennessee. If you missed it, like I did, maybe you can make it to Nexus, the Northeast Conference on Science and Skepticism. It will be held in New York City, April 5th through 7th. So while we all go reassess our bank accounts and figure out ways to bend the laws of time so we can make it to all the cool events we love to be at, we'll have to be happy with the show notes for this episode, which are all over at our website, Skepticality.com.
Join our discussion forums at www.skepticality.com. Leave feedback by email at feedback@skepticality.com or by phone at area code 206-888-HOAX. That's 206-888-4629. This has been Skepticality. Thanks for listening.